part of the beginning of the Interfaith Youth Core is the stories that I come out of and the movements that I come out of. And three particular movements I participated in college. One would be the faith-based social justice movement, particularly through the Catholic Worker. Dorothy Day's outfit, she started in the early 1930s. I spent a lot of time in Catholic worker houses when I was in college because it was the movement that made the most sense to me. There was a connection with the transcendent. There was a radical social vision with love at the center, which is frankly different than a lot of other radical social visions we see out there. And there was actual, tangible, concrete work being done on earth through the houses of hospitality. So I spent entire summers at Catholic worker houses during my college years. I lived at the Catholic Worker here in Chicago on the north side for some time after I graduated from college. Problem was, I wasn't Catholic. And although I had the deepest admiration for the Catholic tradition, even its worship, not just its social justice stuff, you know, I see holiness in the Catholic tradition. I have no desire to be Catholic. And so my question was, how can I be fully Muslim and do committed social justice work? So that's one movement I come out of. The second movement I come out of is the youth service movement, which was all the rage when I was in college. Public Allies and Teach for America and City Year and all these youth service programs starting, and all of my friends in college were volunteering, and many of them took a year off after college to be committed full-time volunteers. And it just seemed so vibrant to me that my generation was about doing service, and not just the kind of Band-Aid service, but teaching in schools for 2 years. I mean, that's educating the next generation, right? Being a part of a community for 2 years in Public Allies or in City Years. That's a powerful statement of a life. And what's interesting about the youth service movement is that diversity is a part of it, right? Race diversity and ethnic diversity and class diversity, but religion was never considered in that kind of diversity matrix. And the third movement I became a part of was the interfaith movement, because religion was an important part of my life, and I had such admiration for the Catholic worker, and I had many close friends who were Jewish and Hindu, so I knew something about their lives and their traditions. I wanted to be a part of a movement that said we can bring different religious communities together for cooperation and understanding. The problem with the interfaith movement is that it's a bunch of old people, frankly, and there's much to learn there, but it wasn't the young vibrancy that I wanted, especially that I was used to from the youth service and diversity movement. So one day I was at an interfaith conference in Stanford, June of 1998, United Religions Initiative conference, and I got a big idea, literally out of nowhere, kind of crashing through my consciousness. What if we combined faith-based social justice, youth service diversity, and interfaith work? We can have an organization that brings young people from different religious communities together to do service and social justice work and share how their different traditions inspire them to do this kind of work. So that was the beginning of this idea. Now, how did the vision develop? Well, first of all, I had two powerful experiences in the 2 months after that first idea hit me. I went to India, and I stayed with my grandmother in India. And I'd never been especially close to my grandmother. I mean, you know, in some ways a typical absentee grandmother-grandson relationship. She would come to the States every couple of years. She would tell me to pray regularly and marry a girl from my Muslim community, and she'd give me a little bit of money, and I'd be out of her hair and she'd be out of mine. But we had a different connection this time when I went in the summer of 1998 to India. I went with my best friend at the time, who's still my best friend, a Jewish poet here in Chicago, who I learn a great deal from and who I work a lot with. And one day, Kevin and I woke up in the morning, and we went to get our tea in the kitchen like normal, and we saw somebody different in my grandmother's home. And I said to my grandmother, "Who is this girl here?" You know, she was wearing a torn white nightgown, a couple of sizes too big for her, and she didn't look like she was part of the household, didn't look like she was part of the family. My grandmother said, I don't know her real name. The leader from the local mosque brought her here. Her father and her uncle are abusing her, so we'll keep her safe. Call her Anissa. That's the name I've given her. And now don't answer the door, Eboo, because the people who abuse her might come looking for her. And it might be a dangerous situation. And I said to her, Mama, you can't just keep refugees in your home like this. It could bring real violence to your door. And she looked at me and said, I've been doing this for 40 years. And she brought out all these old faded Polaroids of women that she had taken into her home over the past 4 decades. She told me the story of a woman who had come from the state of Gujarat, a couple of 100 miles north of Bombay, dripping wet during the monsoon season with 3 children. And she said, we heard about you in the fields we were working in, and I knew I had to get my children out of that life. And my grandmother took them in, and she became close friends with the woman, and the 3 children went to school. They're married now, they're living wonderful lives, and my grandmother has all these stories kind of written in shorthand on the back of these Polaroid shots. She went through a dozen, maybe a dozen and a half of these, and finally, I wanted to hear one more story. I wanted to hear my grandmother's story. I said, why are you doing this? And she said, because I'm a Muslim. This is what Muslims do. And I slept restlessly that night because I was a Muslim too. And I was thinking to myself, what am I doing? And this line by T.S. Eliot flashed into my head, which is that we do not inherit traditions. We work to make ourselves worthy of those traditions. And I was watching my grandmother, a faith hero, a Dorothy Day, an Abraham Heschel, a Martin Luther King, in front of my eyes, be the kind of Muslim that I believe Allah intended for us to be. And at that moment, I made a decision that a month ago I'd had this idea about an organization that brought young people from different religions together to do service and social action work. And if that idea was in my head, that was God shining the light on a path, and I had to be committed to walking that path.